They lied about the end of Little House on the Prairie. It wasn't because the kids got bad grades. It was stars who didn't like each other in public, power struggles that split the cast, and one last act of destruction that no one saw coming. What happened in the last few days of Walnut Grove wasn't just a TV ending. It was about them. The shocking truth is finally coming out after 40 years. Laura Ingalls Wilder wrote a series of autobiographical books from 1932 to 1943 that were based on her childhood in the late 1800s. One of the most well-known books in the series, Little House on the Prairie, 1935, shows both the hard times and the simple pleasures of life on the prairie. Wilder had planned to write a memoir for adults, but publishers weren't interested. Rose Wilder Lane, her daughter, told her she should rewrite the stories for kids. Because of that choice, Wilder became a famous author. Her books have been translated into more than 60 million copies around the world, and 5 of them have won the Newbery Honor. After many years, these stories caught the attention of Ed Friendly, who used to work for NBC. In 1972, he noticed something when he saw his teenage daughter reading Little House on the Prairie. He realized that these books could be the perfect basis for a TV show. Roger Lee McBride, who was close with Wilder's daughter and had inherited the rights, owned them. Friendly thought he was the best person to bring Wilder's world to TV, but he had no idea how hard it would be. In the 1950s, Walt Disney thought about making a movie based on the books, but decided not to. It seemed like the story was too complicated to be made into a family-friendly show. Friendly didn't give up. He wanted the show to be as true to life as possible by showing how hard it was to be a pioneer. He hired Blanche Anelas to write a script and talked NBC into letting him make a 2-hour pilot movie. It should have been a win, but soon, Michael Landon, a man with even more power, would cast a darker shadow over his plans. Friendly pictured a show that seemed real, with a rough-looking Charles Ingalls and a poor family struggling to get by. But Landon had his own thoughts. After 14 years of playing Little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza, he was ready for a change. In 1973, Friendly gave Landon the script for Little House. Landon agreed to direct the pilot, but he had one big request. He wanted to play Little John. That made everything different. Landon did more than just play the lead role. He ran the whole show. He was in charge of producing, writing, and directing a lot of the shows. He didn't want the show to be a scary story about barely making it. Putting warmth, emotion, and family values at the center was important to him. Rather than having a beard, he played Charles Ingalls without one. He made sure the characters always looked nice instead of focusing on how poor they were. Friendly and Landon got into a fight right away. Friendly wanted the story to feel like it really happened, with kids running around barefoot, houses that looked old, and people struggling to get food and a place to live. Landon pushed for a more proper and emotional approach. He thought that people would relate to a sweet family story more than to the harsh realities of life as a pioneer. Things got worse between them very quickly. NBC knew that Landon was a star. He told them what they had to do. Either Friendly moved out of the way, or he was going to leave. The network picked what it would do. Friendly had to play a silent partner. He was still listed as a co-executive producer, but he didn't have any creative control. He later made a joke that Landon's version should have been called How Rich Is My Prairie? A jab at how far it was from what Wilder had originally planned. Even though there were fights behind the scenes, the Little House on the Prairie pilot, which aired on March 30th, 1974, was a huge hit. It was based on Wilder's third book and showed how the Ingalls family moved from Wisconsin to Kansas. The episode was directed by Landon, and Karen Grassel played Caroline Ingalls with Landon. NBC executives were impressed, and the show's high ratings led them to order a full season. The setting was one of the more difficult parts of the story. They built their house on land that was owned by the Osage. The show didn't go into all the details of a historical fact that had real-life effects on Native American displacement, but it still managed to show both the beauty and hardship of life on the frontier. Melissa Gilbert tried out for the part of Laura Ingalls when she was only 9 years old. Michael Landon wasn't interested in any of the more than 500 girls who applied. He did not want a child actor who was well-trained. He wanted to meet someone real. Gilbert looked like the right amount of warmth and sadness. She got the part, and Landon quickly gave her the nickname Half Pint, which she used on and off screen. Gilbert grew up in front of the camera for almost 10 years. From 1974 to 1983, she played Laura, a character who was both innocent and strong. Her real-life background made it even more natural to cast her. She was taken in by actors Paul Gilbert and Barbara Crane when she was born. Jonathan Gilbert, her brother, also got a part on Little House and played Willie Olson. Gilbert was a star by the end of the show. The year she got her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame was 1985, when she was only 21 years old. She also became friends for life with the people she worked with. Allison Arngrim, who played her enemy Nellie Olson on TV, became one of her best friends. On screen, they were fierce rivals, but when they weren't working together, they became fast friends. Gilbert became one of the most popular young actresses on TV because of her role as Laura. Karen Grassel almost didn't get the part of Caroline Ingalls. There were dozens of actresses who tried out, but none of them felt quite right. Michael Landon asked Grassel to read for the part at the last minute. It was clear that she and Landon were a good match, even though she had only done a few TV shows before. She was cast in the part, and her performance made Little House feel like a strong mother figure. Caroline, played by Grassel, was smart, kind, and steady on screen. Off-screen, things were more complicated for her. She thought her character was often just a bit in the background and wanted more important plots. Landon was in charge of the creative direction, and their differences sometimes made things tense. Still, the way she played Caroline left a lasting impression. She did more than just play a mother. She was the main character. She was the center of the Ingalls family. Allison Arngrim tried out for the role of Laura Ingalls, but didn't get it. She was then cast as Nellie Olson, a part that would make her one of the most memorable ladies on the show. Nellie caused the most trouble in Walnut Grove. She had golden hair and a sharp tongue. Fans often thought Arngrim was just like Nellie in real life because she was so good at the part. She was warm and funny in real life, not at all like she was on TV. She took on the part over the years, writing books and going on public appearances to promote Little House. Kate McGregor brought a new kind of energy to the show when she played Nellie's mother, Harriet Olson. Harriet could have been a simple bad guy, but McGregor gave her more depth. She really went for it when she played Harriet. This makes her both funny and annoying. She even wrote an 8-page backstory for Harriet to help people understand who she was. The extra work paid off. Harriet Olson became one of the most memorable bad guys on TV. It was fun and crazy to watch Arngrim and McGregor play a mother and daughter on Little House on the Prairie. Their characters kept things interesting in Walnut Grove, mixing up the show's happy moments with drama and mischief. The first episode of Little House on the Prairie aired on September 11th, 1974. Other reviewers said it reminded them of The Waltons, a well-known family drama with touching stories that had already won over viewers. Some people thought Little House was too emotional. Some people thought Michael Landon looked too polished to play a rough-and-tumble pioneer dad. A newspaper called Time even made fun of his looks, saying he looked more like a Hollywood star than a frontiersman. Even though there were early doubts, the show quickly picked up speed. When it first aired in March 1974, the pilot movie got a 26.2 rating, which meant it was a huge hit. That meant that almost half of all TVs were turned on. The first season did okay, but nothing special. It got 13th place in the Nielsen ratings. When NBC moved the show from Wednesdays to Mondays in 1976, Season 2 was a big change. It made a big difference, that little change. Little House had risen to number 16 in the ratings by Season 3. It was NBC's most popular scripted show that year when it got to number 7 in Season 4. Little House on the Prairie was more than just a hit by the middle of the 1970s. It was an event in culture. People of all ages were moved by the emotional stories and struggles they could relate to. Scholastic News Time did a poll in 1975 and found that it was the country's favorite show among kids. On Nielsen, it never fell below the top 30 in any of its 9 seasons. People really cared about the Ingalls family, as shown by how long the show ran. Little House on the Prairie was known for its sweet family moments, but it also dealt with serious issues that weren't often seen on TV at the time. Race, drug abuse, disabilities, and abuse were all tough topics that the show didn't shy away from. Season 3's The Wisdom of Solomon was one of the most powerful episodes. It was about a young black boy named Solomon Henry. He was so eager to learn that he was willing to sell himself as a slave. Charles Ingalls said no, but the event raised a painful question. If you could be black and live to 100, which would you choose? There was a moment that shocked many people. Another thing the show wasn't afraid to talk about was addiction. In Season 9 of Home Again, Albert Ingalls had a hard time with being dependent on morphine. For family drama, it was shocking, but it was also a first. At the time, not many shows talked about drug abuse so openly. Parts 1 and 2 of Sylvia dealt with another tough subject, sexual assault, and showed how it changed a young girl's life in terrible ways. As Mary Ingalls went blind, the show also looked at disability, child abuse and child of pain, and women's rights in a matter of faith. These stories were important to the main story. By adding them to the show, Little House became more than just a drama about the past. It showed real problems that people are still having today. Big awards didn't pay much attention to Little House on the Prairie, even though it was a huge hit. It was nominated for 16 Emmys and won 4 of them over the course of its 9 seasons. It won a lot of awards like Outstanding Cinematography, for he was only 12 in 1982, and Outstanding Music Composition for The Craftsman in 1980. One of its most important nominations was in 1978, when Melissa Sue Anderson, who played Mary Ingalls, won an award for her role in the story about Mary going blind. She was the youngest actress to ever be nominated for lead actress in a drama series at the time. Even though she didn't win, the nomination showed that the show was more dramatic than some critics thought. The People's Choice Awards, on the other hand, knew right away how important it was. In both 1978 and 1979, Little House won the award for Best Drama on TV. The show was also well known in other places, winning awards in Spain and other places. Michael Landon and Karen Grassel played Charles and Caroline Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie for many years. They were together in real life, but it wasn't perfect. In 1975, during the second season, they started having trouble. The show was a huge hit by that point, and Grassel thought her growing role deserved more money. She went up to Landon, who was not only the star, but also the producer and director, and asked to have a fair conversation. He instead shut her up. He told her that Ma wasn't as well known as some of the other characters and that her pay should be the same as the younger actors. He later remembered that he explained it by saying things like parody with the girls, as if her work were like that of child actors. After that, the way they worked together changed. Grassel thought Landon began cutting her scenes and putting her character in the background. He is said to have made fun of her on set in front of other people. Aside from that, he often made rude jokes about women's bodies before filming sex scenes, which made her feel ashamed and frozen. She never denied his skill, though. She knew that his tough childhood had shaped how he dealt with power and relationships. After many years, before Landon's death in 1991, they talked on the phone and were nice to each other. That made her feel better. But the tension between them is still one of the most interesting things about the history of Little House on the Prairies. The happy marriage they showed on screen was nothing like the trouble in real life. Landon wasn't always the source of cast tension. Sarah Ingalls and her sister Laura were played by Melissa Gilbert and Melissa Sue Anderson. In real life, though, they weren't close. In her 2009 book Prairie Tale, Gilbert wrote that Anderson always seemed cold and hard to connect with. Anderson was quiet and closed off, while Gilbert was emotional and friendly. Some people thought that her strict stage mother kept her away from the other actors. Gilbert even remembered Anderson's mom driving around with a license plate that said 3 Missy, which made it seem like only they lived in a small world. There was a big difference between the two girls on set. Gilbert said that she did feel envious of Anderson sometimes. Boys were interested in her because she looked nice, which made the gap between them even bigger. Anderson said in retrospect that she wasn't trying to be cold. She just liked to keep a straight face and avoid arguments while filming for long hours. She said she was smart and quiet, even though she knew that some people thought that was rude. There were rumors of a fight between them for years, but Anderson said they never really had a problem. Their lack of warmth was clear, though. Anderson didn't talk about Gilbert much in her 2010 autobiography, The Way I See It. They were just two different people who never really became close, she said. Knowing how little they talked to each other in real life made their close sisterly relationship on screen even more interesting. Some of the drama going on behind the scenes was less about personalities clashing and more about people having strong opinions. Catherine McGregor, who played Harriet Olsen, was very big in real life and on screen. She was loud, nosy, and bossy, just like her character. Her co-stars often found her difficult, especially since she liked to point out mistakes in their work. On-screen daughter Nellie was played by Allison Arngrim. She said that McGregor always gave acting notes, even to Michael Landon. There were a lot of fights between them because he wasn't used to being pushed. McGregor was very intense, which didn't always make things easy, but she was very good at what she did. She often forgot her lines or overacted, but she always did a great job. Arngrim called her a genius and said that people couldn't deny how much McGregor added to the show, even when she made them mad. She also went above and beyond to make her character better. She gave Harriet Olsen a long and detailed past and made sure that every choice she made had a reason for it. Even Landon knew how important she was, even though they had problems. She made Little House on the Prairie what it was. Not all fights were over power. Some of them were very personal. Allison Arngrim and Melissa Sue Anderson had their own tough relationship. Arngrim, who played the sneaky Nellie Olsen, said Anderson once told her he would hit her in real life while they were practicing a fight scene. There was a lot of anger, so the producers changed the scene at the last minute. After that, things didn't get much better between them off-screen. When Arngrim tried to get to know Anderson better over a game of backgammon, Anderson called him stupid. She always thought Anderson was fake and rehearsed, like a beauty pageant contestant who planned every move very carefully. Not only she, but also other people saw it. Anderson was also seen as cold by other cast members, though some thought it was because of her mother's influence. Early in the 1980s, Little House on the Prairie was a huge hit on NBC. Things changed over the years, though. It became less interesting over time, and by the end of its last season in 1982 to 1983, it had dropped to 29th place in the ratings. It wasn't a sudden drop. It happened slowly, season by season, as the writers got tired of making things and the viewers' taste changed. Melissa Gilbert played Laura Ingalls, who was the main character in Little House. Many fans saw her as the heart of the show because they had watched her grow up. Though, as she grew up, the show had to change too. After she married Almanzo Wilder, played by Dean Butler, the show turned its attention to Laura's new life as a wife and mother. This change stayed true to history, but it changed how the show worked. In earlier seasons, stories about families sticking together and making it through tough times did really well. Everybody could relate to episodes like The Lord is My Shepherd and The Richest Man in Walnut Grove, which were about problems that everyone faces. The show moved towards more personal stories that didn't have the same emotional impact when Laura took over as the lead. Almanzo was a different matter. In real life, he was a big part of Laura's story, but viewers never really liked him on screen. The way Dean Butler played the part was thought to be stiff, and his character didn't have the depth of Charles Ingalls or even supporting characters like Mr. Edwards or Nellie Olsen. The chemistry between Laura and Almanzo was never as strong as it was in other relationships on the show. People had a harder time getting behind the new direction of the show because of this. When Michael Landon left, it was the worst blow. He was more than just someone who played Charles Ingalls on TV. He wrote, directed, and produced a show, so he shaped its emotional core. His leaving opened up a space for creativity that couldn't be filled. The show tried to add new people like Rose, Laura's daughter, and the Carter family, who moved into Walnut Grove to replace the Ingalls. These changes did not work, though. The new characters didn't connect with me as much as Charles, Caroline, and their kids did. The show changed its name to Little House, a new beginning after the 9th season. This was the last chance to get people interested, but it didn't have the same heart. Special episodes like Home Again, in which Charles Ingalls came back, only made people think of what they had lost. Little House on the Prairie was one of the most popular TV shows when it was at its peak. Over 17 million people watched each episode of Season 4, which got as high as 7th place in the Nielsen ratings. But by season 8, which ran from 1981 to 1982, the show was only ranked 25th. In its last season, only 14.5 million people watched each episode on average. TV was also changing at the same time. In the early 1980s, people were less interested in family dramas and more interested in flashier shows. Too many people were watching soap operas like Dallas and Dynasty at night. More than 83 million people watched The Who Shot JR? Cliffhanger, which made Dallas a cultural phenomenon. It was the most watched show in the United States by 1985. It was all about power, money, and betrayal in these shows. The slow-paced problems in small towns and Little House on the Prairie began to seem old-fashioned in comparison. This change in taste wasn't just about TV. People with more money and power lived in a new era in the 1980s, which is often called the age of conspicuous consumption. With their fancy homes and designer clothes, shows like Dynasty showed this. Little House on the Prairie, on the other hand, was about hard work, being simple, and learning morals. Many viewers felt like it was no longer important. Little House tried to add more dramatic themes, like crime or drug abuse, but they didn't fit with the show's original style. The Last Farewell, the last episode of the show, aired on February 6, 1984. Fans were surprised by how it ended. Whole parts of the quiet town of Walnut Grove were destroyed. In the story, the land was legally owned by a cruel businessman named Nathan Lassiter. People in the area fought him, but they lost in court. They made a choice that no one saw coming when they knew they could lose everything. They didn't want Lassiter to make money off of their hard work, so they destroyed their own town. Sarah Ingalls and her husband Almenzo were the first ones to do something. At their boarding house, they set off a bomb, breaking it down into pieces. The rest of the town's people followed one by one. There were homes, businesses, and even a church and schoolhouse. It was all blown apart. The people of Walnut Grove built this town themselves and wouldn't give it to a shady outsider. After the last explosion, they got together and sang "Onwards, Christian Soldiers" as they walked away from the ruins. Fans were shocked by how powerful the ending was. It was very sad for the actors and crew to film this scene. Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura, said later that it was the longest funeral she had ever been to. They worked on these sets for almost 10 years. It was where some of their most important memories took place. Personal milestones, first kisses, and friendships. It was like losing a second home to see Walnut Grove go up in flames. After the explosions, the damage they saw was real, even though the explosions were filmed without actors being there. A lot of people started crying. The Last Farewell is still one of the most memorable endings in TV history, even after 41 years. But this destruction was more than just a story. That's also what Michael Landon did to say something. NBC abruptly ended Little House on the Prairie in 1983, which shocked the cast and crew. Landon was the main person behind the show, but he wasn't even told directly. Mel Gilbert was the first person to know. In her autobiography, Prairie Tale, she wrote that Landon was very angry when she told him. He felt lied to after 11 years of working for NBC. He chose to blow up Walnut Grove because he was so angry. The set would not have been kept by NBC if Little House was ending. Landon made sure that it couldn't be used for another show by writing the destruction into the script. It wasn't just a shock ending. It was a message. Things went from bad to worse. When Landon found out that NBC had not included Little House in their fall schedule before they told him officially, the way the network handled it made everyone in the cast feel bad, not just him. Ratings for the show had gone down, but fans still watched it every week. The quick cancellation without proper notice showed how little NBC valued a show that had been one of its biggest hits. The show never went away, even after its last episode in 1983. It became one of the most watched syndicated shows ever. By 2025, 13 times as many people watched it as the average TV show. Streaming services like Peacock got more people to watch it. People watched more than 13 billion minutes of it in 2024 alone. It wasn't just nostalgia that kept it going. People are still interested in the story. The show is now going through one of its biggest times since it first aired. When Netflix announced a reboot in January 2025, people reacted right away. A few fans were happy. Younger people might like the story if it were rewritten. Some people were scared. Too much change? Could it keep what made the first one great? The main point of disagreement was whether or not the new version should include modern issues like gender equality and diversity. People have talked about these things before because of Little House on the Prairie. The first show didn't shy away from talking about tough subjects. It dealt with racism, drug abuse, and sexism long before most family shows did. The actress who played Laura, Melissa Gilbert, told fans that the show had already come a long way. But some viewers today are afraid that Netflix will go too far and change the show's message to fit with today's styles. Others say that the story needs to be updated to stay current. The showrunner for the reboot, Rebecca Sonnenschein, says she wants to stay true to Wilder's vision while also making the show work for today's viewers. Little House on the Prairie is more than just a show. Over 73 million copies of Wilder's books have been sold, and the show has been on TV for almost 50 years. It's an American thing to do. The question now is whether a new version can make it work like the old one did. One thing is certain, the reboot will happen. The story is still important. People are still affected by it. That's what keeps Little House on the Prairie going after all these years.